I'm Nathalie Mezza-García, and welcome to the Floating Cities Show. Here, you'll learn about the latest floating projects, developments, houses, buildings, neighborhoods, floating city plans, and the regulations, zones, and jurisdictions that enable them all across the world. You'll hear directly from the makers, the architects, designers, developers, engineers, and even the regulators that make floating projects possible. Come join me while together with Sofia, we help you navigate the complexity of these new waters. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Hi, Albert. How are you?
Hi, good to see you.
Good to see you again. So our guest today is very special. He's Albert Richards from Powerhouse Company, and I'm sure you're familiar with his work if you have seen the floating office of the Global Center of Adaptation in Rotterdam. So cool, by the way. I just want to start saying cool. I'm very excited to talk to you. How are you?
Good, thank you. Thank you for having me. Indeed, I'm one of the architects at Powerhouse Company. We are a firm of around 100 people in Rotterdam, based in Rotterdam. We also have some offices around the globe. For instance, now I'm in Oslo because we have a little branch in Oslo, and we are working on some projects there. So I'm on a little trip in the meantime, and then we're also doing things in Beijing. In China, yeah, it's a great office to work with, a very diverse group. And recently we moved into the floating office, which of course was made for the Global Center on Adaptation, but also became our own place of work.
Yeah, last time we talked, you were there. You were in a really nice wood. You had a really nice background.
Yeah, it's a pity that I am not there now to kind of show you a little bit of the office, because the last time we talked, we were there indeed, and I could have kind of shown you a bit more. But I believe you have some images that you can run by and
yes,
during as well. So I think that will give a good impression. But yeah, it's a really awesome place to work actually, and it's a good way to also test whether our design intentions actually work well, and whether it's a place of work. Yeah,
true, because you are the user of your own product. So you
exactly. Yeah, we are very lucky to have that experience. I mean, I myself as well. Like as I said, like I'm one of the this group of architects in Powerhouse Company. But it's quite special to be able to be one of the users of your own design and see if your intentions were made clear and came to the front properly.
Yeah, I've always wondered if architects design their own homes or if they buy them already built.
Well, I guess, yeah. I mean, the founder of Powerhouse Company, which is Nana de Rue, you will probably be able to look him up as well on our website. He designed his own house. Very beautiful penthouse with a view on the skyline of Rotterdam, which is very special. And
nice.
We have another partner of ours, Stefan Prins. He's basically our sort of sustainability expert. He built his own home, kind of like just outside the center of Rotterdam. So yeah, I mean it's common as well, but it takes a while to get there. Let's put it that way.
Yes.
At least I have been able to design the office I work in. The house, I guess, will be a slightly later step. It'll come at some point.
It'll come. I'm sure it'll come. But still, that experience of designing your own offices is one that even less architects get to have. So
perhaps, yeah.
Really cool for that. And the city of Rotterdam, where your offices are located, are actually one of the reasons that took us to this call because we want to know, and I'm sure our listeners and viewers want to know everything about the floating office. And I know you also have other projects on the water, beautiful artistic expos, but why don't we start with the floating office and why is it placed where it is?
Yeah, so just to give a bit of context, the floating office came about actually after the municipality of Rotterdam joined a bid to be the selected municipality for the Global Center on Adaptation, which is basically a subsidiary of the UN. So if I go back to 2017, basically, or actually 2015, during the Paris Climate Convention. The previous big one. We just had one, of course, in Glasgow, but then before that, there was the big one in Paris.
Yeah, huge.
Back then, Secretary of the UN, Ban Ki-moon, was responsible for actually, together with the Dutch government, together with the Dutch Prime Minister, Rutte, to kind of set up the first base for an institute that would become basically a global hub for adaptation as a whole. Not only when it comes to climate change, not only when it comes to sustainability, but of course also the rise of sea levels around the globe. And to become a hub for knowledge exchange, but also, of course, for the networking and lobbying to make sure that certain initiatives around the globe can take place. So the Dutch government, of course, had a pretty good position then. Historically speaking, Holland is quite known for the fact that we are dealing with the ocean. We are dealing with being very close to and sometimes even quite far below sea level.
Yes.
So we've developed over the last few centuries, we've developed all kind of techniques to sort of protect ourselves from this and to be adaptive and resilient to the changes that come with that. So there was already quite a lot of knowledge in Holland. So Holland was, of course, already a very good place, but then they needed to find a city, a location within Holland in which the headquarters of the global center could be located. And Rotterdam basically profiled itself as a harbor city. It's known, of course, for being one of the biggest harbors in the world.
Yes.
No longer the biggest one, but up until quite recently, it was actually the biggest harbor in the world. Very important hub for Europe, basically, and basically the hinterlands of Europe as well. So, but at the same time, of course, Rotterdam needed to change. It needed to innovate. It started in the historic city. So, and then as ships grew, the harbor grew, and as new generations of ship grew even larger and larger, the harbor actually sort of started moving away from the center of Rotterdam.
Okay.
Leaving behind these former harbor areas, former waters inside the center of Rotterdam.
Okay.
And that, of course, brought a lot of questions. So you are, on the one hand, you're a harbor city, but your harbor function is moving away. But still, you have all this sort of leftover infrastructure in the city that is also growing in terms of population, in terms of public spaces, and so on.
Yes.
So what do you do with these remaining areas? Let's say that was kind of the general context within which Rotterdam was dealing with.
Okay.
So they decided to profile themselves as a livable harbor, an innovative harbor. Together with a city, basically. So where life and harbor and basically the heritage of a harbor,
Cool.
together with basically nature, are intertwined somehow. And that was a very attractive kind of bid. Also because actually Rotterdam has always been quite an innovative city, not only due to its harbor, but also due to the architecture that is it's also well known for, there's quite some important architecture firms that are based in Rotterdam that operate internationally. And at the same time, obviously, the Dutch context being the water landscape all coming together in that city. So it was a very attractive proposal. And in the end, the Global Center basically voted for Rotterdam to be the place where the headquarters could be. And there was a sort of side note to this bid. The mayor of Rotterdam back in 2017, when they actually applied for this bid, basically he promised that they would get a floating office in one of the areas. So the fact that we're floating, the fact that we designed a floating office actually is just a one-liner that started with the mayor of Rotterdam, Mr. Abu Taleb, that had this vision. And that was such an attractive vision that in the end, this municipality was chosen, and that's why we're on a floating office. Yeah.
That is so cool. It really shows how the impact that policymakers can have to
Definitely.
Sometimes they slow things down, but when they really push things, it can be very helpful.
Well, what is interesting about this is that first of all, there's the need, of course, to have some kind of institute that manages this knowledge and that brings together experts in the field from all over the globe. So there was, on the one hand, that need. And indeed, you have like a policy maker, in this case, the mayor of Rotterdam, the highest person of the municipality, that decides, well, this is a vision that has to be fulfilled, and our city stands behind it, basically, and supports that idea. And it's basically a point on the horizon that actually aligned everybody that was involved in the project to work towards that goal, let's say. And it's interesting how this one-liner basically have so much, in the end, have so much power, let's say, to really align all the parties involved, because in the end it really consists of many different groups, teams that have to make sure that something like this can happen, not only physically in terms of the architecture and the floating, but also financially and so on. So yeah.
And even in terms of the building, the building process, and that is something that we'll talk about later, also super interesting. And when or how did Powerhouse come to play?
Yeah, so we're situated now in the so-called Rijnhaven. It's one of the, if you have Rotterdam, you have the sort of north side of the Meuse River, the Maas River, and then the south side, and the city is basically expanding towards the south. And the Rijnhaven you could say, is one of the first generation of harbors that was actually too big for the historic center of Rotterdam, which is on the north side, let's say. So they went to the south of the main river, and there they had more space to make larger harbors. And so we, as Powerhouse Company, since the city is making a move towards the south, growing further south along these bigger harbor areas, we also were already kind of working on a vision for the Rijnhaven. So the municipality was working on a master plan regarding new developments of housing and public space around that Rijnhaven harbor. And we were also on one of the locations developing a plan for housing development involving an old factory building there. So we were basically working on that vision also since 2017. Actually, we started on that basically when Rotterdam got chosen. So we had been doing, countless workshops together with the municipality, with urban planners, with city developers, to basically define and refine the vision that we had for that location. But it was, of course, right next to the Rijnhaven, where they had projected the location for the floating office. And well, we were just talking about how municipalities can give a really good drive by putting a point on the horizon. I think we also experienced how municipalities sometimes can be a bit delayed in certain decision making.
Oh yeah, not
And
just municipalities, but
well,
also
so
other
I mean,
government. Yeah.
it also protects us. So I think it's also, you know, it's a mechanism of checks and balances that is good for the citizens, obviously. But sometimes, and in this case, for instance, the promise had been made to the Global Center on Adaptation that they would get their office in 2020, October of 2020. And by the beginning of 2019, which was basically 2 years ago, they had no feasible plan and design yet for what they promised to be a floating office.
Okay.
And since we were already working in the area, since we were already kind of involved in the vision for the Rijnhaven, and since also Powerhouse Company actually we work together with a developer called Red Company, and both these companies are founded by the same founding partner, Nano
Okay.
and that also made quite short links in order to also, you know, find the developer that then could, you know, find the resources to finance this project. So, and then on top of that, Powerhouse Company itself, we are very, we have a sort of in-house sort of knowledge and team to execute our projects. So we don't only do design, we also draw all the plans, the final drawings for the builders. We do that as well. So that combination was, of course, extremely good to ensure that, and to kind of also give the municipality and the city the trust that we could manage to not only design but also have the project built within the time frame that they had set. And since we already were also, you know, acquainted to the municipal the people from the city that were you know, decision makers for that area, we basically all the lines were short, and we could make many shortcuts in the process, and that's how we basically got on board with this, quite literally.
Indeed. Yeah. So as you say, it's a process of multiple people, multiple disciplines, kind of a holistic approach, if you want to call it in that way.
Definitely.
Yeah. How interesting. And in terms of the building, okay, so you got the project in your plate.
Yeah.
And then what?
Well, it as I mentioned, it had to be done quite fast. So we had to find a way where we could merge basically aspects of design that we are really, as an office, are attracted to when it comes to sort of like aspects of elegance, of kind of representative nature. Obviously, this was an office that would house a representative organization in the global center, of course. And we are not necessarily an office that sort of like waves the flag of sustainability as a sort of like you know, as a
just
main item.
Okay.
We do see it as something that should be integrated in the design, and in the end the result should be a nice and well thought out, elegant work, basically.
Yeah.
So yeah, we had to find a way to be somehow efficient, smart about buildability and speed of buildability, and also maintain that aesthetic quality. So what we went for is we tried to come up with a design that was very elemental, very minimalistic in its sort of design, but also in the components that it was built of.
Okay.
And that's basically how we ended up thinking of a very grid-like design, where the structure, the wooden structure, really plays the main role. And basically everything from that point was about how to maximize that effect of having this timber structure with its beams and its columns, and to make that really feel as the protagonist of the design. And then, of course, there's all kind of sort of very rational and pragmatic aspects that go with the design. So there's now a pedestrian bridge crossing from one side of the harbor to the other side of the harbor.
Okay.
The basically north and the south, and it's not a huge bridge. It can open. And so we needed to design, first of all, we needed to make sure that the floating office could fit through that bridge. So, of course, then that already defines a sort of maximum width for it. And then basically you also have the fact that it needs to be something that is financially feasible. So you need a certain amount of square meters. If you have a certain amount of square meters and you'll have a certain width, it also in the end will mean you need a certain length. And then you cannot go too high, because the higher you go, the more like the more weight you have to carry. So you need to really make more floating. It has to float more stably, and that means that you then need a bigger floating foundation and so on. So we also wanted to keep this kind of sleek, low profile. Also regarding the fact that it gave a much more human scale to basically what is around the harbor, which are big buildings. If you bring all these sort of, on the one hand, you have sort of our philosophy of design, and then you have the aspect of efficiency, but you also have just the pragmatics of what is needed to make sure that building takes place. If you combine them all together, you basically kind of arrive to the floating office as we designed it, let's say.
And part of speeding things up had something that I find very interesting that you had to do to speed things up was to build the foundation in 15 different places. I know that some parts, right?
It's 15. No, well, it's not 15 different places, but it's 4 different places around the country. So that's true. That's completely true. It's still that. It's 15 boxes that are connected to each other. So maybe that's why the confusion. But
so 15. That's a lot. 15 boxes, 4 different places. Some even travel 200 kilometers.
Yeah, some of them traveled from the northeast of the country. So there's only a few dry docks in Holland that can make the size of pontoon that we can that we needed, basically. In a way, it's not like a very unconventional size. The interesting thing is that it's basically, in Holland we also have kind of floating boat houses. And they are basically built on kind of standard pontoons with a certain width of 6 meters or maximum 6 meters. So we needed we needed builders to make those floating pontoons. And there are not many that make them. So there's 4. But they had to be made simultaneously, because otherwise they would not be on time for the building that had to come on top. So that's why we had them basically poured in concrete in 4 different locations, and all of them were then tugged all the way to Zaandam, which is near Amsterdam, where they were then assembled together. Basically they're assembled together by cables that are kind of compressing them together, like a post-tensioning system somehow.
I understand.
And by compressing, let's say, you could say 15 concrete shoe boxes, you then get like a huge platform that then becomes the floating foundation of the office. And this platform is around 90 meters long, 25 meters deep, or like wide, and then 4 meters deep, more or less. And that's basically the volume you need to build this 3,500 square meter office on top of it. So it was then assembled in Zaandam, and then from Zaandam near Amsterdam, it was then tugged all the way to Rotterdam, and that took around a day. And then
Oh,
it
wow.
arrived in Rotterdam, going and fitting just through this bridge that I was talking about. So that was a tense moment. But
Oh, were you watching?
yeah, I was not in town at that moment, but I was watching a live feed, and of course,
Cool.
my colleagues, they were actually on one of the boats following the foundation. So that was a very exciting
That
moment.
is so interesting.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah, so that's those are one of the things that we had to take into account for the design, that we needed to, of course, speed up the process by having not only everything that is on top, all the timber structure, but also what is below the water, to have that made in a sort of modular system. So basically, you could say the grid upon which the building is based is also defined by the pontoons that are carrying the building, because it's where the pontoons meet, where let's say the walls of these boxes meet, where you get the support structure for the columns on top, basically.
Okay. Wow. I can paint a visual picture of what you mean.
I'm trying
It's
to
very
describe
clear.
it as clearly as possible. So
it is clear.
If you do not have the right images, at least you kind of get an image of what I'm going for. Yeah,
I do. Yes.
Great.
And talk to us a bit more about the timber and the wood, because I know that was a very important aspect. As you said, you don't think of sustainability just as a checkbox or as a fake flag, but something that you truly integrate into the whole building. So talk us about the timber and the relation that it had with your sustainable approach.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the first thing you think nowadays, because it's a very trending material, is that when you think sustainability, you often think directly of wood. So, and I'm not going to deny that when we, of course, got the commission from the Global Center on Adaptation, which in many ways has to do with sustainability, the first material that came to mind was timber, actually. So from that point of view, you know, like, it kind of made sense to do that. But then, of course, you discover, definitely because of the floating aspect, you discover that there's many more advantages to timber, because it's, first of all, it's lightweight. It's a much lighter weight material than concrete or steel, and yeah, for the floating, it really is very important to not be too heavy, because it basically has implications on everything else somehow. Like so from that point of view, timber, of course, became a much more it made a lot of sense to just go for timber from the get-go. Actually, we never really doubted whether that would be the material to go for.
Okay.
And then there's other advantages that have to do with the buildability. It's light, which means that it's also easier to handle on the building site. So it does help the building process, and it's also very easy to, you know, if you need to make certain last minute adjustments, wood is a very easy material to work with. You can, you know, you can hack a little part out, you can saw and adjust here and there. So fortunately, we didn't need to do much adjustment, because everything was basically designed and fabricated through computer models.
Awesome.
But you know, it is useful, since in the end, wood is a kind of living material that expands and contracts with different weather circumstances. It is useful to also have that flexibility on the building site. So in that sense, it's an extremely good material of choice. And then, of course, you know, I can go and mention all the advantages it has when it comes to sustainability. It's a great storage for your CO2. And when you apply the timber within a certain cycle, it actually really works as a. So often we think with CO2, of course, the wood stores CO2, but it doesn't necessarily save CO2. Let's say it just stores it within the material. So what happens if it burns, for instance? then basically, again, all the CO2 goes away. But the thing is that when you see it within the loop where the timber comes out of a forest that then grows new trees that then themselves start absorbing CO2, that then will then be removed out of the system of the forest again in order to give way for new trees to go. If you see it within that cycle, then of course this makes a lot of sense, of course. And we sourced our trees from right over the border of Holland in the west of Germany. So we also kept the transportation routes as short as possible.
Okay.
And so in so doing, you in the end manage to, and you of course we sourced the timber from forests that are dedicated to wood production.
Yeah, I know.
And
not any random forest.
Yeah, so that's basically, you know, those are those are then of course a lot of new facts besides the buildability, besides the flexibility that of course are extremely attractive when you build in timber. And I think it's also very educational for us. You know, timber is something that is really becoming more and more common in our practice. Funny enough, it was very common for a long time in many other cultures. Like I'm half Japanese, and we know that timber is something that has existed for centuries in Japan. But now timber in this new form of factory-made, precision-made timber, of course, has many new opportunities for basically the demands of future building somehow. And we're definitely discovering and exploring this, and it's a very educational process as well.
So besides the CO2 reduction brought by using timber that comes from a forest dedicated to growing trees and replanting them, talk us a bit more about other sustainable aspects of the building, more precisely about the sustainable systems for electricity, for heating production, since we're talking about how it's cold here right now where we are, where we both are. So,
Well, I mean, basically, there's the CO2 chapter of building, let's say, and then there's also the energetic chapter, basically the energetic side. And well, the CO2, of course, a lot of that has to do with the timber that I just discussed, and then we have the energy, and the energy basically comes from 900 square meters of roof PV panels that we have on our southern roof.
Okay.
So we have a design that has a pitched roof, basically.
Yes.
And we're using one half of this pitched roof, which is kind of aimed to the sun. That's actually the main reason why we went for a pitched roof, is because then we have the right angle for the sun to hit in an efficient way the PV panels, basically. And we designed this roof in such a way that the PV paneling itself is the roof covering, you could say. So oftentimes you will find roofs with like a roof tiles or a roof covering, and then on top of them you find the PV panels, and they're kind of like placed on top of them. In our case, we managed to design the roof in such a way that the PV panels are kind of like seamlessly detailed to the roof, which makes it first of all a very nice and sharp look, but at the same time it also completely increases it maximizes the area of PV panels we can have, and that accounts at the moment for 900 square meters. So that's our electricity source. And then under the water, so we were talking about the concrete pontoons. In fact, concrete was not our first choice. We actually, you know, under the kind of like the title of sustainability, we were actually thinking of reusing old push barges that are used by the shipping industry. because we thought if we recycle, that means it's better for our sustainable footprint and so on and so on. In the end, the problem with push barges is that they have to be inspected every 4 years, and they have to be taken out of the water, which is very unpractical. They're made out of metal, they're made out of steel, and therefore there are, of course, corrosion risks and so on. So we kind of hesitated, of course, to then move to concrete, which of course is known to be a very CO2 heavy material. But we kind of didn't have a choice. But what we did discover along the way is that we could use that concrete to use as a sort of heat exchange, using the water, the temperature of the surrounding water that we are in, to help cool the building. And so where on the one hand we had some disadvantages with the CO2 regarding the concrete, we did gain a lot, because the concrete could actually house within it a special tubing system that would then run water through the barges, which then kind of transfer the water temperature into this basically tubing system. And then this tubing system is pumped throughout the building along our ventilation system, which then cools the spaces and the office. And this pumping is basically happens electrically. And as I mentioned, the source of electric energy is basically our roof. And so I think, with this, I actually want to explain that it's all these systems that kind of work together. So in the end, of course, some systems might not be the best because you use concrete and it's not CO2 friendly. But then on the other hand, they do benefit somewhere else in the system. So by thinking of this whole office as a sort of holistic design, you do manage, of course, to, in the end, have like really outstanding performance. We have like a really high energy rating, and then we also have on the other roof half is a green roof. Where we even have beehives, we have birds living there. There's bat houses. So even though it's relatively small, the building, we also are somehow playing a little role in at least giving a bit of biodiversity to that area. So and like that, we have a very outstanding performance of the building, let's say, without conceding. We still have huge windows, we still have a lot of glass, we still have amazing views. We don't have like windmills showing how sustainable we are. It's very kind of like understated but minimal design, and at the same time it still performs or outperforms many other buildings, basically.
It outperforms so much that you give 10% back to the grid.
So that's a good point. We are not disconnected from the grid. I think that sometimes the people think that we are completely disconnected from the grid. That is not the case. That has to do with actually two things. First of all, our winters are darker. It's dark at 5. They're cold, so we don't have enough solar energy to power the entire office during the winter. But the summers are long, and we have long days. So that means that during the summers we actually have more energy than we need. So if you take the whole year, then after doing the whole year, we do have a surplus of 10% or around 10%, more or less. So that's why we need to be connected to the grid. Next to the other reason that the grid, let's say the energy that comes from the PV cells is a high voltage energy that has to be then transformed to lower voltage for basically all the appliances and all the installations that we use. And we didn't think it was a very smart idea to put a transformer, like a high voltage transformer, underwater. We thought we would just keep that on the on the city side, on the land side. So that's the other reason why we have this connection.
Okay. So when people think about solar, many people still say, and it is true to a certain extent, you have to have a big space for storage. But here you have only half of this building roof with solar panels, and you power a 3 stories building.
Yeah, we power 3,500 square meters, which I think equates, for people that are thinking in feet, to basically 35,000 feet, more or less.
Okay.
It's around, I think it's around 10 times the calculation, but yeah, it's 35,000 feet, more or less, the building. Okay. So it's the largest floating office in the world at the moment. Yeah, we are able to power it by 900 square meters of solar panels. We don't have batteries, so there's definitely we can gain there somehow by storing. But I think that's what you were kind of implying.
Yeah, but I didn't know you don't have batteries. That is so interesting.
Well, we don't need them exactly because we're connected to the grid. So so you know, like whatever surplus we have just goes into the city's grid.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, cool.
But that being, I do feel that storage is definitely part of the future for making, making, first of all, to kind of, when you don't have the possibility of the grid, to be extra efficient. And I can also imagine a future in which maybe we don't even need a grid at some point. If everybody has their own storage and everybody has their own power, like their PV cells, then you don't really need to make that whole infrastructure around it somehow.
Exactly.
So you get a much more decentralized way of dealing with electricity somehow, which also has its great benefits, I think. So from that point of view, I think that's what you were mentioning. Storage, of course, is somehow the future, and we don't have batteries as we speak now. But since we are using a lot of volume in order for the office to float, we do have a lot of space in the floating barge, in the foundation, basically, to eventually add batteries if we would need to do so, or if we would, yeah.
Okay, so you left the space there on purpose, or?
Well, you need that space to float, basically. So you know, like the floating happens through the famous law of Archimedes. You need to displace a certain volume of water in order to create the force that keeps us above water, and that volume is basically empty space that is below the building. And currently we have all our installations, all our basically HVAC installations, our cooling units, our heating units, our our air circulation, they're all underneath.
Okay.
But they definitely do not fill up the entire foundation.
Okay.
Yeah. So we can add more. Of course, being careful that we remain balanced. That's the other challenge of building floating, is that you have to distribute your weight evenly, otherwise you tilt in the wrong direction. And but there is definitely a certain margin in which we can add certain things to make it performing even better in the future. And I think batteries would be one of those components.
Okay. So when you have many tenants in the building, right? One of them is the Global Center of Adaptation, another one is Powerhouse, and several others. Do you have to, in order to keep the balance of the building, when you are arranging things in the office, do you have to coordinate where to put the table? For example, this is a stone table that I'm currently working on. It's heavy. Do I have to talk to you to be able to bring it, or?
No.
You already
on
took
that level, there's nothing to worry about. It's
Okay.
such a heavy building. We're talking about around, I believe, around 8 million kilos, basically.
Oh wow. Okay.
So the one table,
Wow.
even though your table even if your table might be 200 kilos, so to speak, it won't really make a difference.
Okay.
Of course, everything is accumulates, but let's say, generally speaking, the people inside and their furniture, they will not influence it. If you're talking about, let's say, fixed elements like walls or things like that, then of course you have to take it into account. But generally speaking, there's no need. But it is definitely an element to keep in mind in the design. So that's actually the reason why our building is very symmetrical in the two directions. So in the short side, it's a very symmetrical setup, but also in the long side. So we also enter the entrance of the building is in the middle, where you are greeted by a beautiful steel spiraling stairs. But the reason it's positioned there is, first of all, it's positioned in the middle, and the building had to be built from the middle outward. And the stairs can only be made in a few parts. So it had to be placed there before the roof was set. And and therefore it made a lot of sense also for the speed of building to just have one big stairs that you can put in one moment, in one go. You can place it where it needs to be, and then you build around it. And you have to build in a balanced way as well. So everything has to be balanced, and that's why the stairs is in the middle. But it also makes sure that it's a counterbalance for our we have on the other side, on the opposite side of the stairs, we have our cores for our toilets, our elevator shafts, our ducting for all our installations, our cooling devices. It's all placed on the opposite side of the stairs. And here there's a lot of walls involved. We have stability walls, we have structural walls, we have walls that are dividing all these rooms. And they, of course, are relatively heavy. So that is then mitigated by the stairs, the steel stairs, which is relatively heavy.
Interesting.
So, you have these sort of like balancing acts that you're doing, and the same applies for the fact that we have the solar panel roof on one hand, but the green roof on the other hand is much heavier.
Really?
Yes.
Oh wow!
Also, it absorbs water after it rains. It keeps the water, so it also gets a bit heavier. And the way we've counteracted that is by having on the south side, we have basically steps going down to the water that are hanging off the concrete foundation. And so you have on one hand, you have the green roof, and on the other hand, you have the steps. And by having those things together, it all balances out again.
That is so interesting.
Yeah, wow. It's and it's something completely new, of course. Like if you're used to building on land, you would never have to deal with these kind of questions. But but that's definitely also one important factor of how the design actually became what it is now. Yeah.
And now it has there's a pool outside of it.
Yeah. There is a pool in the sense that you do swim in the same water as the harbor.
So
I wouldn't call it like the beautiful tropical pools you have along some beautiful coasts. But the pool is there basically because we do believe this harbor, as I mentioned, the harbor function is moving out, and the Rijnhaven as such also in combination with this new master plan that is going to be executed in the coming years, it's going to be a public space. It's going to be an enormous square, you could say, but then made out of water. So the pool there is actually to indicate that we really need to start thinking of what we can actually do in the water in terms of playfulness and in terms of public space. So we added that as an element. From a regulation point of view, again, going back to the municipality, they always have to take their steps a bit more slower. We're not officially allowed to actually jump in that water. It's not a health hazard, but it still is not allowed from a municipal point of view. But that's why the pool also works, because by putting the pool there and by making it very visible,
I see.
It triggers like, hey, we should actually do something about this. We should think about
wow.
And so that's the other reason for the pool, actually. Yeah.
That is so cool. Okay, so then the phrase is you cannot jump in the pool yet.
Well, we do anyway, of course.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love
And
it.
we've done so. We've had a great summer, and we've definitely enjoyed being able to take a dive in between hours to just refresh a little bit.
Cool.
We have our own shower as well, so we can have all that happen. Yeah.
That is extremely interesting.
And so we in the master plan of the harbor, I mentioned that they're gonna surround the harbor by new building developments, new housing, and so on. But the harbor itself is going to change dramatically as well. So part of it is going to be reclaimed. So they're going to expand the land to be able to give place to that new development. But there's also plans to make floating boulevards and floating parks all around the harbor. And so in that sense, the technique that we applied is a kind of pilot for all the floating parks that are going to be built around the harbor.
Okay.
And the reason why they are going for these floating parks, so I was talking about the pool obviously as a recreational thing, but since this harbor is one of the bigger harbors, the difference between, let's say, the quay and the water level is sometimes very big. We also are dealing with tides, so we're still close to the ocean, which means that we have tides of 1.5 to 2 meters 4 times a day.
Oh, 4. Okay.
Yeah. So we go up and down 4 times a day. That means that the office goes up and down 2.5 or like 1.5 to 2 meters 4 times a day.
Nice.
But in order for the water to really be reachable for the citizens of the city and the residents surrounding it, it's very useful to have floating public spaces like floating parks. And so currently they're already building sections of this one of the floating parks that is going to be located between the office and the water side. And it's a park. It's 25 meters wide. It's going to be, I think, around 400 meters long.
Oh, long.
And it has the capacity to also have trees in it. So it's actually going to be a proper park for people to be really close to the water. And I think it's interesting to see the office as well in that slightly bigger context, that it's also somehow sort of public place. There's a restaurant there that opened a few weeks ago that makes use of the terrace around the office. So it's open to public from that point of view. But if you want like really open public space, the office somehow is the first pilot to be able to do so on water. And currently the city is also building new floating parks around it. So that's quite an interesting development as well. And then at the same time, of course, we try to make sure that the people working in the office have a nice place to work in, nice outdoor spaces. So each floor has its own balcony surrounding the floor. So basically from each floor, you can basically step out and enjoy the views, enjoy the space. It's still for me quite spectacular to be basically in the center of the city, but then have so much space around you. That's a very luxurious thing to have on the water. So we also made sure that there's enough outdoor quality and outdoor space that surrounds the building, essentially. So all these aspects, they come together in the end.
Yeah, I imagine that having stressful calls in that balcony makes them less stressful. You can say, okay, let me step out.
Totally. I mean, that's exactly, that you named exactly one of those things, to be able to, like I've done these walks. It's around, if you walk slowly, it's around a 10-minute walk, which is a perfect coffee break. You just and grab a coffee, and then you can slowly stroll around the office. And and I've also had, for instance, like sometimes you need to have a very short just a short meeting with a colleague to make a decision, and then you just say, well, we'll just make one round, and by the end of the round, hopefully we've come to a decision, and then
That is so cool. Maybe
and in
it's
the
gonna
meantime,
become.
you've been outside, you've taken a bit of fresh air, you've
Wow.
enjoyed the views. So, and all floors have this. So also our top floor where the global center is situated, they actually have even deeper balconies because they're of course a little bit further away from the terrace. So they don't really, to get down to the terrace where they actually have outdoor space. It's a longer distance. So instead, they have a big balcony around their floor which has enough space to furnish it. So you could actually add furniture on the level as well. So that means that they have a direct access.
I just thought of how you maybe have invented a new measure of unit for floating, just like in the US, a feet, I imagine that at some point was someone's actual feet. Mm-hmm. Maybe you have just invented a new measure of time. Okay, one round. We have one round to do this.
Exactly.
And it is the length that it takes to go, the time that it takes to do the whole perimeter of the building.
Exactly. Yeah.
That is so cool. Extremely. So can anyone go and visit the building?
Well, I mean, the offices are offices just like other places of work. So you cannot access every single space, but you can definitely access the deck around the building, and the restaurant is open. Currently, we are dealing with some the measures for COVID again. So we're dealing with some limited hours, opening times. But I mean, we hope that at some point things will kind of return to a little bit more normalcy, and then definitely you can just go there. You can dip your feet in the water while enjoying a nice drink. So we're
jumping the
already
pool.
very much looking forward to the next spring. We haven't even started winter yet, but we can't wait till spring. But then other days we've had amazing sunrises and sunsets, and the reflection on the water and the colors are beautiful as well. So you're constantly feeling kind of this, you feel that the environment is really coming in with the big windows we have.
Yeah.
The light really plays in a very important role. You also see kind of like the reflection of the water you see in the ceilings.
Oh, wow.
So
nice.
All these aspects are extremely beneficial to, your mental kind of state. And because it really makes you feel very, somehow very comfortable. When you're working, you really feel the environment, but then at the same time, you're in a sheltered space.
Yes.
Where you can kind of see what's happening around. So yeah, I think maybe to close, I think what we achieved with the office is to come up with a design that is based on extremely pragmatic decisions that had to do with time, efficiency, ease of buildability, the fact that it floats, the fact that it needs to balance,
the fact that it needs to go through the bridge.
Yeah, all these things. And when you look at the technology, it's not like we are applying like the most innovative gadget or anything, like PV panels, they've existed for a long time. Heat exchangers have existed for a long time. But I think it's really about putting all those elements together into a very kind of clean package that makes the building work the way it works. And then if you add to that, a design in which, let's say, the feeling of comfort is central, let's say, by having great views, by being able to walk outside, by being able to easily go outdoors, by also, stimulating interaction and meeting. If you add all these things up, you get into a very holistic kind of approach, and that has been a very educational thing for us as an office. Like, how do we design? How do we think of our buildings? and at the same time, it's something that is sort of like crucial to how we work in the future as designers and architects, and also it brings with it, let's say, a good mindset of collaboration, of understanding the different needs that are there from not only the technical point of view but also the user point of view.
Yeah.
And this mindset is, I think, extremely important for advancing, let's say, our profession.
I think so too. And urban planning also, I think you could have not said it better.
I think exactly. It's because it goes beyond scales in the end. It's not. It goes beyond whether it's the detail of a window frame, or it's the mindset of kind of understanding your experts, being in a dialogue, understanding the needs. This mindset really helps to be able to kind of think beyond certain scales and think holistically about different complex elements and complex situations. And definitely, I totally agree. I mean, in the end, of course, the whole project is actually a kind of like spin-off of an urban plan that we were working on.
Yes, exactly.
So for us, it definitely worked from that point of view. I think the reason why the municipality trusted us was the fact that we were able to look beyond the boundaries of our profession. Nana de Rue, the founder, is also a developer, so he knows how to look beyond the boundary of being just purely a designer. And at the same time, we're working with urban planners, we're working with engineers that are specialized in making floating objects, and you really need to listen to everybody to make sure that you get the best result. So
yes, I can't wait when everything opens again, and can't wait to be again in Rotterdam. I'll definitely visit the offices. I'll have a coffee.
You're very welcome to pay us a visit, and we'll be very happy to give you a tour. And,
thank you. I'll try to make it in the summer, so I can jump on the pool.
Sounds good.
Oh, awesome. Well, thank you so much. I learned a lot. I'm sure that our listeners and viewers also learned a lot. And I'm really looking forward to sharing this episode and being there in person sometime in the coming year or next. So thank you.
Hopefully soon. Thank you for the opportunity. It's been really interesting to have this conversation with you, and I'm really curious to see if anybody has questions, or if that's the case, then I guess we will somehow get to know of them through you, and we'll be happy to get in touch as well. So
perfect. Yes, and I'm also putting here the social media information for how to contact you, Powerhouse email, so anybody that has questions can ask you directly. So
definitely,
but also through us. I'm more than happy to start a dialogue. And thank you, Albert. You've been great. I really want to keep taking more of your time, but I won't take more of your time. So maybe in another occasion, hopefully. And
I would be looking forward to that. Thank you very much.
Perfect.
And I wish you a great rest of the day.
Thank you. I hope it gets a bit less chilly. So it won't be the case for you. So, but still, I wish you a very nice rest of the day.
All right, cool. Thank you very much.
Perfect.